His was the only boat to arrive.
I think maybe it was a cow. I don't know.
There's the thank you letter from Lyndon Johnson.
There was even a monorail at one point to the east of us.
Plus, everybody forgets about pirates.
This is the coolest field trip I have ever been on.
I don't know, but I've been told, keep on dancing, won't ever get old.
Hello and welcome to the Long Island History Project, the podcast that brings you stories and interviews with people passionate about Long Island history. You can hear them all at longislandhistoryproject.org. My name is Chris Kretz. I'm your host, and our opening music is courtesy of the Homegrown String Band. And we usually stick to our familiar map of Nassau and Suffolk counties on this podcast, but sometimes we get distracted, and in our excitement and haste, we get on a train going in the wrong direction, and only gradually do we notice the unfamiliar landmarks flashing by outside the windows, and we stumble out when the line ends onto platforms in the dark, surrounded by mysterious parking lots and storefronts selling foods for which we have no name. And in those cases, we find ourselves confronted with a new, unknown Long Island in need of a ride and someone to act as guide. Today, we find ourselves out under a vast open sky in the capable hands of today's very special guest.
My name is Carrie Cox.
Short and sweet. And Carrie, we'll get into your background, but this is part of my ongoing search for other Long Islands in the world, in the country. And I've read that you are a sucker for history tourism. So
a little bit.
You're the perfect guest. And so maybe to start us off, can you tell us where you're from and maybe give us a tour of your hometown?
Oh, goodness. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. So yes, my name is Carrie Cox. I was born and raised in Long Island, Kansas, population 150. And let me tell you, being able to tell people that I was from a place called Long Island, Kansas was a funny life growing up. Not everybody believed that there even was a Long Island, Kansas.
What was funnier? What was funnier, that they knew of another Long Island, or just the fact that there was an island in Kansas?
I think most people said to themselves, "There's no way there's an island in Kansas. How can you possibly be from a town called Long Island, Kansas?"
Gotcha.
Yeah. And take you through the town. Is that kind of what you said?
Sure. Yep.
Well, let me do my best here. So Long Island is very much in the rural area of Kansas. There are no stoplights. There was one stop sign growing up. You're right on Highway 383. That is about 4 miles south of the Kansas-Nebraska line. And, for the most part, it's a farming community, a lot of agriculture, a lot of people who are, contributing to what Kansas is known for, which is a lot of crops and livestock.
And what was your family business? Were they farmers?
Yeah, my family business, yes, my family were farmers, are farmers, I think is probably the better way to say that. In fact, one of the fun things I like to talk about is the fact that I was born and raised in the same house that my dad was born and raised in. So it's the original homestead for us in Kansas, and my brother is taking over the family farm right now.
Oh, great. What do they grow there?
So for the most part, we're a hog farm. So we grow pigs, and you probably have tasted some wonderful bacon that's come from the pigs that have been raised in Kansas. And my brother also has, he has cattle, and we have a little bit of land. Basically, the land is used just to grow the crops that feed the pigs.
Okay, great. So what was how would you characterize your childhood, or what memories, give us a day in the life of young Carrie on the farm?
This is so fun. Sorry, I'm giggling so much. Let's see here. So I feel like I grew up in kind of its own little Americana. I'm sure it probably doesn't feel that way to people from Long Island, New York, but it certainly feels that way to me. I graduated with only 14 kids in my high school class. Most of those kids I knew from kindergarten all the way through my senior year of high school. Frankly, many of those families grew up and also graduated from the same high school that I graduated from. And so it was just a very close-knit community. It's a consolidated high school. So Long Island, Kansas actually is in tandem with Alameda, Kansas, and then also Prairie View, Kansas, to be able to form one high school. And again, with 14 kids in my high school class, it was a very small school, but there were a lot of advantages to being able to grow up in that kind of a community.
And what would you do for fun?
Well, I can tell you that when I had my driver's license, because that, of course, is what everybody loves to have, you get that little bit of freedom. When I had my driver's license, one of the main things that I would do on a Sunday afternoon, I'm going to get so much flack for this, but I would drive to the pop machine, which was open. It was like, because there were no stores that were open on a Sunday. So you could go to the pop machine and you could just, grab a Mountain Dew or grab a Dr. Pepper. But we're talking such a small community. I did grow up with a small grocery store there. However, I think it probably wasn't able to continue business. I'm trying to remember exactly. Throughout my high school years, there was a local restaurant there that would help feed a lot of the farmers, or if somebody needed a meal, there were one or two churches, a gas station. It again, just a very small community.
And were you the Leopards, your high school?
Actually, so the Long Island Leopards were what it was originally created as. You're correct. And in fact, the school that was built is still standing, and the middle school is there right now. But when the school decided to consolidate, I think it was around 1970, it became Northern Valley. And so the Long Island Leopards are no more. But that's that's okay. The school is still there to remind everybody.
So what was the Long Island, the Northern Valley, what?
Yeah, you're right. We were the Northern Valley Huskies.
Huskies, okay.
And if I can brag a little bit about that, the Northern Valley Huskies actually have done quite well for a small, what was considered a 1A school. We played 8-man football. There are several state championships actually from the men in football and basketball and track, and even my sister and cousins were members of some of the women's state championships in volleyball and basketball. So again, a tight-knit community, very proud of the heritage that was there, and some really, incredible people to be able to come out of that rural area and appreciate, kind of like me, just appreciate what it was that we were able to grow up with in kind of a little bubble.
And actually, there are many rural areas of Long Island, especially if you go out east. Did you? And by comparison, my father grew up in Germany in the 30s, so he was on a farm. So
okay,
it might be a weird question, but so did you help slaughter the pigs? Was that part of your experience?
Thank you. It was not part of my experience growing up. No, my dad always laughed. He said he was really lucky to have his 2 girls first, and then he had 2 boys later, so that he could still work the farm on his own during those years when my sister and I were growing up. But when he needed a little extra help, that's when my brother's muscle came into town.
Okay, good. So why was it called Long Island, as far as you know, or was there any water in sight?
Yeah. So what you have are 2 different creeks around Long Island. You have the Prairie Dog Creek and you have the Elk Creek. And when it would rain, there was literally just this swatch of land in between. And so the Native Americans named it Long Island, and the name stuck.
Were you, at what point did you become aware of Long Island, New York? Do you remember the day?
No. So here's what's funny. I think I became aware of Manhattan, New York before I ever became of Long Island, New York, which is so funny, right? Because of what Manhattan is with New York, but Manhattan, Kansas is where the State School of Kansas State University is located. And so not only was I born in Long Island, Kansas, I went to school in Manhattan, Kansas. And that yes, Long Island people love that story.
That's great. So what are some of the local legends that you heard? I did some research, and I'll throw some things at you soon.
Okay, please.
They're from the 1800s. So
Yes.
But just so growing up, like what were the legends, or the scary parts of town, or what do you remember hearing from older people?
Oh, I can't wait to hear what you know. The main legend that I am familiar with is that the Hoppus family, and specifically Cora Hoppus and her family, had a carousel that they purchased. It was a used carousel from Abilene, Kansas. And they took that, it was a traveling carousel, and they would take it around the area, and they would charge a nickel for a ride and a nickel for a bag of popcorn. And they made so much money. You're talking late 1800s. Cora Hoppus was quite a little financier back in that day, being able to just take this carousel round and round, but they made their home in Long Island. I am very curious what else, though, that you happen to know, because I'm not sure if anything else rings a bell for me.
Well, all right, I'll throw these out. And again, this is just, the best that Googling in a few hours could bring me. Well, I'll give you the highlights. Meteors, giant rhinoceri, and the grasshopper invasion of 1874.
Oh I'm afraid that one was not on my history list, unfortunately.
So
I don't know about that one.
again, I'll just run through what I found. But so there were a lot of, I guess, geological research going on. So some I don't know if you ever heard about fossils being found, these prehistoric rhinoceri that I think are in the National Museum of Natural History.
Nope. Okay. Nope. You've got me on that one.
And some meteors that were recovered. This is the beauty of Google Books. You can find
Wonderful.
Yeah, and actually the grasshopper invasion, I had heard on a previous episode, I was talking to someone who studied disaster relief efforts. And one of the earlier that he found was this, I guess, a swarm of grasshoppers plaguing the Midwest and some need for relief out there.
Okay. Well, I can totally understand that taking place, but I'm afraid I don't know.
It wasn't talked about
It
anyway.
wasn't talked about.
Still too soon to talk about.
It could have been too soon. Yes.
But what do you have connections to the circus, or in that area was the circus part of a?
So it's funny. Just as far as any connections, my mother's best friend did have kind of a role in a circus that was in that area. It wasn't the one that we were just talking about.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of a funny story. Like there are pictures of me on an elephant when I'm 3 or something. And so.
And just to round out all the cliches I can.
Yes, please, you're on a roll.
Tornadoes?
Yeah, definitely tornadoes. In fact, a lot of people. And I think that this is kind of an experience for Kansans in general.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, walking outside and you can see funnels forming and you kind of look at your family and you say, should we do something about that? And they look at it and they're like, no, that's too far away still. But by the same token, there have been ones that have come directly through town and through the county. And then that's just really difficult in terms of the debris, in terms of all of the devastation that takes place and people's homes. And the one time I remember calling home and my father sounding very preoccupied, I said, is everything okay? And he said, well, no, they actually just sounded the tornado alarm. And it's been, the sky's been funny all day. Oh. And I'm under the basement, trying to pull some things out. So we got some space to be, in the lowest place possible in the house. And I just thought to myself, I'll call you later. I'd never heard my dad say anything like that before.
He sounds very stoic though.
Yep. Stoic's a good word.
Talking to you.
Yeah, I did. I just kept talking. It's true.
So I don't know how much, if you want to talk a little bit about your profession, but you wound up in the travel profession. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. So long story short, I graduated from college and I moved to Colorado shortly thereafter. I worked 15 years in the audio industry for radio stations. I took a break and did some personal things on my own. And then shortly after COVID, I moved to Florida, which is where I am currently. I'm working as a travel writer and a blogger and a reviewer, and I saw some advertising for a travel magazine.
So I'm going to flip my usual question because I like to ask people, we kind of explore the perception of Long Island, New York outside of Long Island, New York when we can. So for one first question for you is, so now that you've moved out of state or as you travel, what are people's perceptions of Kansas that you found, if any?
Well, when I tell people that I was, born and raised in Kansas, I kind of get, some looks like, oh, really? As if they don't really meet very many people from Kansas. I will say that the Kansas City Chiefs have given us a pretty decent name thus far, sure. Right? Yep, with the good luck that they've had recently. KU basketball brings in a lot of fans as well. I'm a Kansas State Wildcat, so that was nice of me to actually give any acknowledgement to KU whatsoever. But other than that, I just have people who say, okay, did you grow up on a farm or how did you get to Florida from Kansas? Some of those kinds of questions come pretty frequently. But overall, that's an understanding, of just kind of, oh, okay, you're from Kansas.
Yeah, no, it's a badge of honor. So so the second layer to that question is, as you traveled, I'm assuming you've been to Manhattan, New York, but what perception do you have of Long Island, New York? Have you ever been on the island? Have you heard or covered any spots, the Hamptons maybe, or?
I've not covered any spots for Long Island, New York. I have been to Manhattan. I think New York City is fantastic. I will say, I tried to fool a guy in college. I tried to come up with a phony accent, and I tried to fool a guy in college into saying I was from Long Island. And I don't know if he bought it or not. I didn't ever get a date out of it or anything. So I'm assuming he must have thought I was a little crazy and I didn't quite have the accent nailed down.
I don't know if you want to do that for us, or if you can recall the approach you took to it, but
it's been a very long time since college. But no, I think I just tried to have a little bit more of a northern. I'm trying to think. Forget about it. Right, that's about all I know.
Okay. That's good enough. So just to stick on the idea of history, tourism, and travel, and you know what I remembered about 10 years ago, I wound up in Manhattan talking to a group. I was on a panel talking to a group of travel editors. I forget about podcasting, and I forget the impetus for that. But history as a part of tourism, and maybe the local history even, do you see that as an effective draw, or do you see that as the industry leaning into promoting areas by their local history, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just have a natural affinity for history. Instead of reading teen magazines when I was growing up, I had a subscription to the Smithsonian magazine. And so I think that I got that from my dad, and it was something that we had in common, and just appreciation for the country in general. So, when I see the opportunity to be able to promote an area through their history, or the concept of saying, hey, did you happen to catch this? Or maybe you didn't know this about this particular destination. I find that it's probably just something that I have a personal interest in, and for whatever reason that seems to work in my writing. But there are destinations who are doing a very good job of promoting the history, and linking some things together in terms of past and present. I feel like that's actually what makes a destination comfortable to be able to visit and enjoy and learn about.
Yeah. So building off of that, can you name what you feel is an underappreciated historical attraction or location?
Underappreciated. That is a brilliant question. Hang on.
I'm trying to think of my own answer to that, going through my mind. What's the last house museum we dragged the kids to? Or
right? Yeah.
No, we were recent. So maybe to give you time to think. But my son is upstate now in college, and we went to the Erie Canal Museum, which is very interesting, and it's actually literally where the canal was. So they have a section dug out that you can kind of see the scope of it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you're looking for something in Kansas, I can help you. Hang on, what's that called? I might have to Google this, and I'm sorry that is that all right?
Yeah, sure, it's allowed. No one can see.
Okay, hang on. Because they just made it a park, and it's beautiful limestone. I love when you're able to talk to somebody who's done an awful lot of research. And so I appreciate all the work that you've done, Chris, to be able to just have a casual conversation here.
My day job is librarian. And so I have the bug of, any topic I'll start following the threads as far as I can go. And, which is interesting. There's a very behind the scenes look. But when I find these places outside of New York, other Long Islands, I try to find who knows about it. So, start with the local library, the historical society. And yours was, other than the blog post that I found, which originally, alerted me to it, there weren't too many places that held a deep knowledge of, like the Kansas Historical Society or the public library. So you're the repository of all history for Long Island, Kansas.
Oh, well, my family will be so proud as long as don't mess anything up like that. Okay. I did find what I'm looking for. It's called Monument Rocks. So the question was, is there an underrated?
Underappreciated, yeah, right? Sure.
Underappreciated, yeah. Well, in Kansas specifically, there's a place that's called Monument Rock. It is limestone. It looks as if the heavens just dropped, like if you had some icing, right? And it was in the form of limestone. These large rocks are just there, and they're beautiful. And so I always appreciate that one, and I think it's one of those places that a lot of people don't know about because it's a little bit off the beaten path, but Monument Rock.
Right. Okay.
Well worth the drive.
We'll definitely check that out. So we thank you for your time tonight. Anything we haven't asked you about Long Island, Kansas, or anything you want to make sure the world knows before we?
Yeah, great. No, that's a fair question. I actually took a few notes on myself here, and I'm just double checking that I can hit all my high points. No, it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. And there aren't, like I said, very many people who ever say, my goodness, I'd love to talk to you about Long Island, Kansas. Or very few people even know what in the world Long Island, Kansas is. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak about it.
And thank you again to Carrie for joining us over Zoom, sharing her memories of her Kansas childhood. We will have links in our show notes to related resources, some of her writing, where you can find Long Island, Kansas. That's at longislandhistoryproject.org. And if you have your own story to tell, whether your Long Island is our Long Island or you're from outside of the New York area, or you've done some historical research that you'd like us to know about, drop us a line. You can reach us at longislandhistoryproject@gmail.com. Always happy to talk. For now, our outro music is Capering by the Blue Dot Sessions, used under an Attribution 4.0 international license. And we'll say goodbye, but as always, thank you for listening.